The mountain winds howled, an ancient song against the stone walls of the shrine. They carried whispers of a world I'd all but forgotten. For 20 years, I, Kael, had kept this vigil. 20 years watching over the small flame dancing within its crystal heart. Once it burned like a second sun, a beacon of hope visible for leagues across the Dragonspire Mountains. Now it flickered. A pale blue ghost barely strong enough to light the weathered chamber. I ran my fingers through my beard, tracing the silver streaks that marked each passing winter. My shoulders felt the weight of my sacred duty, and my eyes, I knew, reflected the same fading light as the flame I guarded. "Still holding on, old friend," I murmured, my daily ritual. A simple acknowledgement for the last essence of Valerion, the ancient dragon who once shielded our realm, Ethoria, from an unspeakable darkness. The legends were clear. When this flame dies, the final barrier against that ancient evil will shatter. The flame pulsed, as if in response. Shadows danced across the rune-carved walls, twisting like memories. I adjusted my worn leather tunic and walked to the narrow window cut into the eastern wall. From here I could see the kingdom sprawling below. The tiny lights of distant villages, the silver ribbon of the river Lumina, and on clear days, the gleaming towers of the capital. But today was not a clear day. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and unnatural. There was a purpose in their movement, a malevolence that made my skin crawl. A sudden crash from below shattered my thoughts, the heavy sound of the sanctuary's outer door being flung open. In 20 years, no one had climbed the 1,000 steps to this shrine. No one. My hand flew to the hilt of my sword, its dragon scale glinting blue in the flame's light. "Hello?" a voice called out. It was feminine, strained with exhaustion. "Is anyone here? Please?" I descended the spiral staircase, my steps cautious, sword drawn. There, collapsed against the heavy wooden door, was a woman. Her cloak was torn, her dark hair matted with blood from a fresh wound at her temple, but even in her state, a fire burned in her hazel eyes. She struggled to rise as she saw me. "The flame!" she gasped, her voice desperate. "I need to see the eternal flame." I kept my distance, my sword still raised. "How do you know of the flame? No one comes here." "My grandmother. She was a keeper before the last war." She winced, pressing a hand to her side where blood was seeping through her tunic. "I am Lyra of the Eastern Vale. The shadows are spreading, Guardian. Villages have gone dark. People are vanishing. Creatures from sealed places. They're emerging." I hesitated. Her words, her desperation, they felt true. I sheathed my sword and moved to help her. Her skin was warm against mine, and as her weight settled against my side, a long dormant feeling stirred within me. "The flame has been weakening for years," I admitted, guiding her up the stairs. "I've tried everything in the ancient texts to sustain it, but it continues to fade." "Then the legends are true," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with dread. "When the flame dies, the darkness returns." We entered the chamber. Lyra gasped at the sight of the diminished flame. Yet, as she approached, it seemed to brighten. Just for a moment, its soft blue light painting her features. The flame, it danced with a newfound energy in her presence. "It responds to you," I said, unable to hide my astonishment. Lyra reached a trembling hand toward the crystal, stopping just short of touching it. "I've dreamt of this place since I was a child. The flame, it was calling to me. I never understood why. Until now." She turned to face me, her expression grim. 3 nights ago, the Royal Observatory in Ethoria fell to darkness. The king's advisor, Malachar, has been conducting forbidden rituals. My father was a scholar there. He tried to stop him. Her voice broke. "They executed him as a traitor. But before they did, he told me to find you, to find the guardian of the flame. My chest tightened. For 2 decades, I had been a hermit, a watcher, isolated from the world's troubles. But the world had just kicked down my door. "What does this Malakar want?" I asked. "The flame," she answered, her eyes fixed on its flickering light. "He believes it contains not just Valerian's essence but his power, the power to command dragons." I glanced at the flame, a new kind of worry coiling in my gut. "There have been no dragons in Ethoria for centuries." "Because they sleep," Lyra replied, her voice low. "Bound to Valerian's will, they slumber deep beneath the earth. Malakar intends to wake them and bend them to his twisted control." Outside, thunder rumbled, much closer now. The unnatural storm was nearly upon us. Lyra stumbled, her strength finally giving out. I caught her before she fell, lifting her easily into my arms. Her head rested against my chest, and that protective instinct, the very reason I took this vow, surged through me with a force I hadn't felt in years. "Rest," I said, carrying her to my simple cot. "The shrine is protected by ancient wards. We're safe for now." As Lyra drifted into an exhausted sleep, I returned to the flame. I studied its weakened light with new understanding. For so long, my duty had been simple: watch, maintain. But now, as the outside world brought its dangers to my doorstep, I realized my duty was changing. I ran my fingers along the ancient runes carved into the chamber walls, tracing the words I had spent years trying to translate. One phrase had always eluded me, but now, with Lyra here, the meaning clicked into place, clear as crystal. "When the bearer of the mark returns, the flame shall find new purpose." I looked over at Lyra's sleeping form. Had she brought more than just a warning? As if in answer, the flame surged, burning brighter than it had in years, bathing the entire chamber in a vivid, hopeful blue light. For the first time, I felt something beyond duty, something beyond solitude. It felt dangerously like hope. Outside, lightning tore across the sky, illuminating the swirling darkness that now enveloped the mountain peak. Whatever was coming, it had found us. My time of isolation was over. I began gathering supplies, checking my weapons, preparing for a journey I never expected to make. I was entrusted to protect this flame. But maybe its true protection didn't lie in hiding it away. Maybe its survival, and the survival of Ethoria itself, depended on bringing its light back into a world that so desperately needed it. As the storm raged, I watched over both the sleeping woman and the eternal flame. The weight of my solitude was lifting, replaced by a much heavier burden. But for the first time in a long time, I would not be facing it alone. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed the beginning of Kale and Lyra's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the next chapter. Your support means the world. See you next time. Dawn broke reluctantly over Dragonspire, the morning light struggling to pierce the unnatural, sickly clouds that had clung to the mountain all night. I stood at the shrine's entrance, my eyes tracing the winding path down its steep slopes. Even from this height, I could see them. Dark figures moving through the trees below, soldiers, and the armor. It gleamed with unsettling purple sigils. They were Malakar's men. "They've found us," a quiet voice said beside me. It was Lyra. Her wounds had been cleaned and bound, and a little color had returned to her face. She moved with a silent grace, the kind born from a life of constant vigilance. I turned to her, my own fatigue pressing down on me. "How did you escape them before?" I asked. She'd been pursued for days, yet she had reached the shrine. "The old ways," she replied, her hand reaching beneath her tunic. She pulled out a small pendant. It was a carved dragon scale, its color a perfect match to the eternal flame burning within the shrine. It was my grandmother's. It conceals the wearer from dark magic, but its power is fading. I nodded, a grudging respect growing within me. This woman was resourceful. "We can't stay here," I said, my gaze sweeping over the ancient stonework of my home. "The shrine's wards are weakening, just like the flame itself." "But we can't leave the flame unprotected," Lyra countered, her jaw set with determination. She was right, of course. Abandoning the flame was unthinkable. I moved back into the central chamber, my steps echoing in the vast, silent space. My destination was a section of the wall marked with runes different from all the others. Older, more complex. "The first guardians," I explained. "They prepared for this day." I pressed my palm against the central stone. With a low groan, it shifted inward, revealing a small, hidden alcove. Inside sat a crystal vessel, pulsing with a faint inner light. "This can house the flame temporarily." Lyra watched, her eyes wide with astonishment, as I carefully, reverently, transferred a portion of the brilliant blue fire into the vessel. The flame danced and swirled within its crystal prison, contained, yet still vibrantly alive. "The legends. They never mentioned this," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Some secrets are passed only from guardian to guardian," I replied, securing the vessel inside a specially crafted leather pouch at my belt. The warmth of the flame pressed against my side, a familiar, reassuring weight. "Now we move. There's a hidden path down the eastern face of the mountain." We gathered what little we could carry: dried rations, our weapons, and the ancient texts that held the secrets of the flame. As we prepared to leave, I cast one final, lingering glance at the shrine. For 2 decades, this had been my entire world. The remaining portion of the flame in the brazier flickered, as if waving a silent farewell. "The wards will hold for a time," I said. The words meant more for myself than for her. "And without the full flame, Malachar won't gain what he seeks, even if he reaches it." The hidden path was a treacherous nightmare. A narrow track, little more than a ledge, had been carved into the sheer, unforgiving rock of the mountainside. In many places it was barely wider than our shoulders, with a dizzying drop into the swirling mists below. We descended in a tense silence, each lost in our own thoughts, focused only on the next careful footstep. By midday, the treacherous cliffs gave way to the deep, ancient forest at the mountain's base. We finally paused to rest in the dappled sunlight, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. "The capital is 3 days' journey south," Lyra said, breaking the silence. "We have to warn the king." I shook my head, my mind racing. If Malachar is truly the king's most trusted advisor, then the palace may be the most dangerous place in the entire kingdom for us. Lyra's expression hardened, her eyes flashing with a fierce light. "King Thalius is a good man, but he's naive. He trusts Malachar completely." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "My father believed the king might be under some form of enchantment, a subtle spell clouding his judgment." A chilling thought. If the king himself was a puppet, our task was even more impossible than I had imagined. "Then we proceed with extreme caution," I decided. "There are old tunnels beneath the city, remnants from an age when dragons and humans lived as allies. They are long forgotten. Few remember them now." We pushed on through the forest, the shadows lengthening around us. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, set my nerves on edge. By nightfall, we had covered a significant distance, but the unsettling feeling of being watched, of being hunted, clung to us like a shroud. As we made camp in a small, defensible clearing, I noticed Lyra studying me, her gaze filled with a curious intensity. 20 years, she said finally, her voice soft in the growing dusk. "Alone. What made you take the guardian's oath?" My hands stilled over the small fire I was building. The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the past. "I was a royal guard once," I began, my voice distant as the memories surfaced. During the last war, I was assigned to protect the previous guardian, an old man named Thorn. He had served for 50 years. The roar of battle, the smell of smoke and fear, it all came flooding back. When the dark forces overran the capital, Thorn revealed he had hidden the flame there for safekeeping. We fled with it, but we were pursued relentlessly. Thorn, he sacrificed himself so that I could escape with the flame. And you've been honoring his sacrifice ever since? Lyra observed, her voice gentle, understanding. I made a promise to him as he died, I confirmed, staring into the flickering flames. But lately I've wondered if locking the flame away in isolation was truly what it needed. Our conversation was cut short by a sudden rustling in the underbrush just beyond the firelight. We both reacted instantly, hands flying to our weapons, our bodies tensed for a fight. But we froze as a familiar voice, strained with relief, called out from the darkness, "Lyra, by the gods, it is you!" Wait, Valerian the dragon would return? How? Saran looked over at Tarek, who just gave a slight nod. He would return, Saran explained, when 3 sacred relics were brought back together. The Heartstone, the Scale of Truth, and the Rider's Band. Only together could they reforge the bond between dragons and us. Lyra's hand flew to the pendant around her neck. Wait, this is the Scale of Truth? She asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Seren just looked at her. It's possible, she admitted. The legends say the Heartstone was hidden away in the Temple of Embers, way out on the kingdom's eastern border, and the Rider's Band, that was last seen in the royal vaults. Tarek's face hardened. So, Malachar might already have one of the relics, he said, the words heavy. Or he's searching for it right now, Kale chimed in, always looking for a strategic angle, which gives us another mission while we're inside the palace. The rest of the day was a blur of tense activity. They checked their weapons, went over the plan again and again, and tried to think of anything that could go wrong. Through it all, Kale couldn't help but notice the space between Lyra and Tarek. They used to be lovers, but now there was this awkward distance, this silent dance of avoidance. He felt his own feelings for Lyra stirring, but he shoved them down. He'd spent 20 years alone. He had no idea how to handle something like this, and their mission was way too important to mess up with personal drama. When night finally fell, it was time. They split up just as they'd planned. Kale, Lyra, Tarek, and Saren would sneak into the palace. The others would cause a stir around the city, creating diversions to draw the guards away. The Festival of Lights was in full swing, turning the capital into this magical wonderland of colored lanterns, music, and celebration. The streets were packed, which actually made it easier for them to slip through the crowds unnoticed. Kyle felt so out of place. After 2 decades of solitude, being surrounded by so many people was overwhelming, but he just focused on Tarek's back, letting him lead the way. They finally reached the garden wall, using the shadows of some big trees to climb over without anyone seeing them. The royal gardens were stunning, a masterpiece of sculpted hedges and fountains, but completely empty. The whole court was inside for the festival feast. Tarek led them to a huge, ornate fountain shaped like a dragon taking flight. The entrance is under here, he whispered, running his hands along the base. There was a soft click, and a hidden panel slid open, revealing a dark, narrow passage. One by one, they slipped inside. The tunnel was cramped, and it twisted and turned, climbing up through the palace's foundations. Eventually, it opened into a room that looked like a private study, filled with strange astronomical tools and star maps. The King's Observatory, Tarek explained in a hushed voice. It connects to his personal chambers. He crept over to the door, listening for a long moment before cracking it open just enough to peek out. It's clear, he whispered back. The king should be coming back here after the feast. They found hiding spots and settled in to wait, the tension in the small room so thick you could cut it with a knife. Kyle felt the vessel with the eternal flame growing warmer at his side, and Lyra seemed to be feeling it too. She kept touching her pendant, like she couldn't help it. Something about this palace was making their relics stronger. Almost an hour crawled by before they heard footsteps and voices approaching. Tarek held up a hand, signaling for absolute silence. The main door to the study swung open. He walked over to a chair by the window while Malachar stayed standing, looking like a panther waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. The preparations for the ritual are almost complete, Malachar said. When the stars align in 3 days, we will be ready to channel the power we need to ward off any threat. The king looked worried. And what about the scholars who disagreed with this plan? He asked, a hint of steel in his voice. Malachar's smile was cold. They've been relocated, so they can continue their research in more private conditions. The king just sighed. Sometimes I wonder if we're doing the right thing, old friend. Malachar's voice was like honey. Doubt is a natural thing, Your Majesty. But sometimes protection requires sacrifice. And that's when it happened. Malachar suddenly went stiff, his head snapping toward their hiding place. We are not alone! The room exploded into chaos. Tarek burst out, his sword already drawn. Your Majesty, you've been tricked! At the same moment, guards swarmed in from the hallway. Malachar just raised his hands, and this swirling dark energy crackled between his fingers. Traitors! In the king's own chambers! He hissed. How kind of you to save us the trouble of hunting you down! Kale drew his own sword, the dragon-scale blade glowing with a faint blue light as it got close to the flame. Lyra and Seren were right there with him, weapons at the ready. King Thalius! Lyra yelled over the noise. I'm Lyra, daughter of Scholar Darian! My father wasn't a traitor. He found out what Malachar is really planning. The king looked completely stunned. Darian's daughter? He talked about you so much before he turned to Malachar, his eyes filled with a new suspicion. Malachar's handsome face twisted into a mask of pure rage. Enough! The dark energy shot from his fingertips and hit Seren right in the chest. She just collapsed, her eyes wide with shock, not making a sound. Seize them! Malachar screamed at the guards. The king is unwell! These assassins have taken advantage of him! The guards hesitated, caught between their king and his advisor. Tarek seized the opportunity and rushed to the king's side. Your Majesty, we have to go, now! Kale lunged at the nearest guards, his blade a blur of motion. Lyra was right at his back, and it was strange. They fought as if they'd been training together their whole lives, their movements perfectly in sync. The vault! The king suddenly shouted. There's something you have to get! He ripped a key from a chain around his neck and shoved it into Tarek's hand. 3rd level, western corridor. The dragon relics. Malachar let out a furious snarl and unleashed another blast of dark magic, shattering the huge observatory windows. None of you are leaving this room alive! Kyle felt the eternal flame at his side flare with this incredible heat. Without even thinking, he pulled out the vessel and opened it, releasing the blue fire into the air. It exploded outward, creating a shimmering wall of azure light between them and Malachar. Malachar stumbled back, shielding his eyes. The eternal flame! He snarled, but his face twisted into a look of triumph. So the Guardian has left his post! How convenient that you brought it right to me! Go! Kyle shouted to the others. I'll hold him here! Tarek hesitated for just a second before pulling the king toward a side door. But Lyra stayed. She stood right beside Kale, her pendant glowing so brightly you could see it through her tunic. Together, she said, pulling it out. The scale and the flame reacted to each other, and the barrier of light between them and Malachar grew even stronger. Kale gave her a quick nod, and they started backing slowly toward the exit, keeping the shield up. Once they were through the door, they ran. They could hear Tarek and the king just ahead of them. Behind them, Malakar's rage was like a physical thing, a wave of darkness chasing them down the palace corridors. They scrambled down staircases and through twisting passages until they finally caught up to Tarek and the king in front of a heavy, reinforced door deep inside the palace. "The vault!" the king gasped, completely out of breath. "Hurry!" The key in Tarek's hand started to glow as he touched it to the lock. The massive door swung open, revealing a room packed with centuries of royal treasures. The king ignored all of it, walking straight to a pedestal in the center of the room. On it sat a plain wooden box. "The Rider's Band," he said, opening it. Inside was a circlet of silver metal that looked alive. It flowed like liquid, but somehow held its shape. One of the 3 relics needed to bring back the dragons. Lyra stared at him. "You knew about this?" The king's smile was sad. "My family has guarded this secret for generations, waiting for the right moment." His face hardened. "Malakar found out months ago. He's been slowly taking over the court ever since, trying to find the other relics." Suddenly, a massive boom shook the vault. Something huge had just hit the door. "We're not getting out that way," Tarek said grimly. The king rushed to the back wall and pressed a series of stones. "There's another way out. It leads to the city outskirts." A section of the wall slid open, revealing a dark tunnel. "I hoped I'd never have to use this." Another deafening crash rattled the vault door. You could hear the metal groaning. "Take this," the king said, handing the circlet to Lyra. "Find the Heartstone. Last anyone knew it was in the Temple of Embers, in the Eastern Mountains." "Come with us," Tarek pleaded. But the king just shook his head. "I have to stay. I have to rally the people who are still loyal to me. Malakar doesn't have total control. Not yet." He stood up straight and suddenly looked every bit the king he was. "Go. Restore what was lost. I'll do what I can here." Reluctantly, they stepped into the tunnel just as the vault door began to buckle inward. The king sealed the passage behind them, plunging them into total darkness, broken only by the soft blue glow of the flame Kale had managed to recapture in its vessel. They moved as fast as they could through the ancient tunnel, finally emerging into a small, forgotten shrine just outside the city walls. The festival lights were just a distant glow on the horizon. "East, then," Tarek said, his voice sounding hollow. "To the Temple of Embers." Kale nodded. The weight of it all was settling on his shoulders. He wasn't just the guardian of the flame anymore.